1, 2, 3, 4. If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Well, hello, Teresa.
Hi, Claire.
Hello, public.
Hello, people who've tuned in like we're an old-timey radio show.
How are you all doing today? I hope you're well.
I hope it's not 1928 where you are.
Yeah, the weather there sucked.
Yeah, although PG&E hadn't lit California on fire again.
Yeah, we've been hit by the smoke here in Colorado from the west, and we're fortunate that things aren't as bad here as they could be. I feel for those people out in Idaho and California.
Yeah.
Greece.
Yeah, not as bad as it even was last year when Colorado was the one on fire and all of the ashes were coming down from the mountains onto the Front Range for a month and a half.
Let's all farm. I don't know what else to do.
Certainly let's stop driving 2 blocks to the store. But farming, yes.
My mom called yesterday and we were talking about the fires and she was upset about them. I'm no expert in environmental science or sustainable agriculture, so please forgive me if I get any of this wrong. But I said, well, all I know to do is to keep doing what I'm doing and try to live as sustainably as possible. And she said, well, is there a connection to the way we treat our land and the fires?
Oh, God.
Which was great that she was asking, though.
Yes.
Or she was saying more specifically, like, the way we farm, is that causing wildfires, basically. And I was like, yeah. And I did my best to explain, again, not an expert, about carbon sequestration and how the planet's heating up. We're having less rain. That's causing dry conditions that increases the odds of a fire. And also explaining to her that in a balanced way, destruction and fire is part of nature's reset, right? That is a healthy part of an ecosystem in balance and within reason, but we have exceeded that and we are in a very dangerous situation. It was kind of cool, actually, to link what I'm doing with the larger environment. It was kind of confirming, and it was cool to have to explain it. Mm-hmm. Just in a really direct way, the connections I see between the choices I'm making in my life and the impact on the environment. I am no hero. I am not perfect. There's a gazillion things I could be doing better, but I'm trying to accept my sphere of influence and say, like, I can affect this, mm-hmm. which is a teensiest drop in the bucket. We need to take action as a species.
I admire you for trying to draw connections between your daily activities and the larger issues of climate change, because a lot of times it just feels so big. It feels like, well, there's nothing I can do about that, right? And there are huge industry polluters, agriculture being among the worst, fashion also being up there, oil and gas industry, certainly. Oil and gas industry, foundationally, the cause of climate change and our reliance on fossil fuels. And it just feels like it's so big, there's nothing we can do. And yet we have to if we're going to survive. Like we're building up to a human extinction event. Hey, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a lighthearted podcast.
You don't need coffee. You just got Teresa's truth-telling, doom and gloom style.
Okay, so you all, full disclosure, my mind is turned to the dark side a little bit because I'm studying for finals right now. And so my hopefulness has taken a little bit of a hit. Claire has accommodated me this morning. We are recording earlier than we normally do. So she had to drink coffee more and sooner than normal.
I'm feeling pretty hyped up.
Yeah, I know that's true, because before we started recording, she was like, okay, yeah, yes, go. Literally saying things like that.
Yeah, my coffee consumption period has been truncated this morning. I have to have my second one as we start. It's been mainlined this morning.
You slammed it this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're overcaffeinated, I'm very tired, and my mind has a dark cast.
Actually, your mind having a dark cast is pretty appropriate for today's topic, because I'm going to take you from the darkness into the light, I think, a little bit. Well, we shall walk there together.
Oh, are we leaving the cave together?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm very much looking forward to being led into the light. There's no one I trust to do it more than you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. It chooses you.
Welcome. I am Teresa Sparks.
I'm Claire Patton.
She and I, that one over there, we talk about things we enjoy and things we love, and we hope that you like them too.
Please remember to like, subscribe. Most importantly, download those babies.
That's right. It's a ratings machine.
It is. Give us them numbers.
Give us them clicks.
Put our money where your mouth is. Wait.
Ew.
Put your money where our mouths are.
But you don't have to pay.
Put your mouth where our money is.
No, none of this is any good.
No, it's not. But it's kind of funny that we're trying. Put your ears where our money is.
No, put your ears where our mouths are.
Yeah. Put your ears where our mouths are. I'll make this sound really cool. Don't worry, y'all. Teresa, I am today going to tell you stories about houses. More particularly, I'm going to tell you 3 stories of people's relationships to their homes.
All right.
I shall start today with the tale of Stambovsky versus Ackley. The New York State Supreme Court's ruling in the case of Stambovsky versus Ackley is commonly called the Ghostbuster Ruling.
I'm so excited. I just got the biggest smile on my face. Okay. Ghostbusters.
This ruling says that a home the owner has publicly, quote-unquote, advertised as haunted is considered legally haunted should the next owner decide to rescind their contract on the home. And that owners are legally obligated to tell potential buyers of the haunting, just like they are for some kind of tragic, horrible event, murder, that sort of thing.
Right. Murder, suicides, and hauntings.
I'm going to now tell you about the origins of this court case.
How did it come to this?
Good question. In the 1960s, Helen and George Ackley moved into a house in Nyack, New York, at 1 Levada Place that had been vacant for some time. Now, this house is a big Victorian house on the Hudson River. It clocks in at 4,628 square feet.
Holy.
And it's that kind of odd Victorian architecture we're familiar with, where it's just big. It has that rounded cupola, 50 windows. That is not accurate. That is my exaggerating brain saw when I looked at it. Oh, like 50 windows on there.
It's like dark confection. It's like that very ornate but somehow sinister Victorian style.
Exactly.
On a gnarled hill overlooking the Hudson. Yeah, okay.
You've totally got it.
Okay.
So in older pictures, it's kind of this hot pink color.
Okay.
Yeah. Currently, it's a baby blue color, which is very pretty. Everyone in town knew when Levada Place was rumored to be haunted, but nobody told the Ackleys.
They're just like peeking around the corners as they move in. Like the moving trucks pull up and everyone in town is like hiding behind the lilac bushes down the street, making like, what's going to happen?
They're just one creepy kid standing at the end of the street going, haunted, haunted, haunted. Over the 30 years that the Ackleys lived there, Helen reported 3 distinct ghosts. One was a couple who seemed dressed in 1700s clothing, and the other was a naval officer in the American Revolution. So there were a couple of well-known spiritualists who eventually came to the house, and they told the Ackleys that the couple was Sir George and Lady Margaret, who were a couple of historical figures. Helen's first encounter with Sir George was while she was on an 8-foot ladder painting the living room.
I thought you were going to say it was when she was on the toilet, and I got really excited about laughing about that. It's okay, I'm laughing about it anyway, even though it's not what you said.
That's a good hard-hitting question about hauntings that's never addressed, though.
Mm-hmm.
Do they bother you while you're on the toilet?
Do they respect any personal boundaries?
So she was on an 8-foot ladder painting the living room, and she said that suddenly this man apparated in midair. So she was like, okay. And then she said, hey, buddy.
How you doing, bud?
What do you think about the renovations we're doing to the house? Do you like the paint color I've chosen? And she said Sir George smiled, nodded his head, and disappeared. Of course, there were unexplainable footsteps and slamming doors. People would be given rings or coins that would disappear as suddenly as they had appeared. When she was a child, Cynthia, Helen's daughter, was often woken in the morning by her bed being shaken by an unseen force.
Time for school!
So fucking creepy. Cynthia reported that at one point during her spring break, she was being woken up by the bed shaking, and she just looked up and said, "Hey, it's spring break. I want to sleep in." And the shaking stopped.
Right. He's just trying to help. He's like, "You're going to be late for school, kiddo. Come on."
Exactly.
Like, "George, it's spring break, man."
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, my mistake. I don't exist on your plane of reality." What is this spring break you speak of?
What is a weekend? While the Ackleys lived in the home, Helen's husband George eventually passed away. And years later, Helen's new fiancé was sleeping in the bed when he saw the apparition of a woman, and he felt himself physically held to the bed. And he later said that he was scared at the time, but looking back, he thinks the spirits were just checking him out to make sure that he was an okay match for Helen.
Hold him down. Let me look at him.
All in all, the Ackleys weren't bothered by the ghosts. The ghosts seemed pretty friendly, and Helen said that they didn't feel terrorized or frightened of them.
It's because they approached them the right way. Because the first thing they did was ask them about the renovations they had done.
Yeah.
"I see you. I understand that you're there. What do you think about this paint color?" And George, the ghost, as we know, was an interior designer in the 1700s or whatever. So he was thrilled to have been asked that question.
In 1990, Helen decided to sell the house. Now, the Ackleys maintain, and I gotta say, I'm inclined to believe them. I believe Helen in the story. I don't know why, but I do. The Ackleys maintain that the real estate agent disclosed the haunting to the buyer, Jeffrey Stambovsky, who entered into a contract on the home. He made a $32,500 deposit on the house, but Helen would not sign the paperwork until he was informed about the haunting. The broker called and told Jeffrey about the haunting, and his response was to laugh and say, "Well, we'll have to call the Ghostbusters." Helen was then informed that Jeffrey knew, so she signed her contract of sale. But Jeffrey, of course, later claimed that he was never told. About a week after the contracts were signed, Jeffrey didn't seem so sure, though. He requested a meeting at the house with Helen, where he asked her to tell him all the details of the hauntings, which she did. He then filed suit to rescind the contract of sale for the house and sued for damages. Now, as we know, the court ruled that the house was considered legally haunted. Jeffrey Stambovsky won the case. The case then made national news, and within a week of the court's decision, the family was getting bombarded with inquiries from people who wanted to buy the house.
Sure.
The home ended up selling for $1.7 million, $600,000 over the cost of comparable homes in the area.
Oh my God.
Since then, there haven't been any more public reports of hauntings at One Levada Place. But that could be because when Helen lost the lawsuit, she said she was going to leave the house and she'd be taking all the ghosts with her.
Oh.
And Helen died in 2003.
Oh. I love that. She's just like, "You know what? George and Margaret and I are out."
And that rando revolutionary soldier.
That's right. He's mostly in the kitchen and out behind the house where the old, smokehouse was back in the day. They fed him gruel out of a cup out there. Well, I love that this guy was being a jerk. He wanted out of the contract. Well, see, this is my reading of how people behave. He wanted out of the contract for unrelated reasons, and he's like, "I was never told it was haunted. I want my money back, and you owe me money, and blah, 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 blah."
100% personal interpretation of the story.
Yeah.
But he was from New York City. So in my head, this is not fact, but in my mind, he was a developer or something.
Sure.
And they loved the house.
That's right.
So he probably wasn't the right person for the house anyway.
My imagination is that he at one point went to see the house and the ghosts were like, "This motherfucker's gonna be..." Absolutely not. And they instead of just looking at him and he didn't ask them what they thought of the new paint colors. He didn't care what they thought. He laughed. He said he was going to bring the ghost, but you don't evict. Excuse me, you're not going to evict us from our home. We've been here 250 years. Charlie the Revolutionary War soldier has to eat his gruel somewhere. Where's he going to go?
For our second story today, we are going a bit dark. I'm going to tell you about a different kind of ghost. This is the story of the Watcher.
Oh.
And it's as fucking creepy as it sounds, I will tell you that.
Well, there's nothing more frightening to any of us than actually being seen.
Mm-hmm. In 2014, Derrick and Maria Broadus purchased their dream home in Westfield, New Jersey, to live in with their 3 children. Derrick grew up in Maine, and he was from a working-class family. Over the years, he had worked his way up the corporate ladder, and owning the home in Westfield was a dream come true for the family. Maria had grown up in Westfield, a few blocks away from their new home. The 6-bedroom house had a $1.3 million price tag and was only 16 miles from New York City. Mm-hmm. Now, I say 16 miles. It was 45 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
This is New York travel time. The address of the house was 657 Boulevard.
657 Boulevard? Weird.
Yeah. I really want it to be Boulevard Street,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's just Boulevard.
657 Boulevard Street. Canada City, Canada.
So one evening in June of 2014, Derrick was finishing some painting he was doing on the interior of the house, and he went to check the mail and found a letter inside. It was addressed in thick handwriting to the new owner. The letter read, "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched the house in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy." In addition, the letter specifically mentioned the couple's 3 children.
Ooh.
"Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me."
Oh my God. No.
This letter was also strange because the Broadus family had only closed on the house 3 days prior. The house was never even publicly listed, so the sale wasn't part of the public record at this point. It was one of those neighborhoods.
Yeah, of course.
The letter continues, "Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin." The letter was signed, The Watcher.
Oh my God.
Creepy.
No, that's a trip to the police station and getting everything on file and making sure you have a security system.
Derrick did all those things. Let me tell you a little bit about the house. 657 Boulevard is a pretty strange looking house. It has a porch that's set out towards the street. Above the porch are several oddly shaped windows that don't really fit together. And to the right of the porch is what looks like an addition, maybe an atrium or sunroom of some kind. This house doesn't really adhere to any architectural style that I'm aware of, though I'm no expert. It seems like a weird mix of styles. The house sits on a tree-lined street of what looks like a neighborhood of historic big houses. It reminds me a little of 80s sitcom houses. You know, the exterior shot of quote-unquote the house.
Mm-hmm.
That's the neighborhood, is that sort of thing. Like, who's the boss? It's just this typical affluent neighborhood, like white people. In fact, Westfield is 86% white. In 2018, Bloomberg ranked it as the 99th richest city in America. It's known as a quiet town with 30,000 residents, and it was named the 30th safest city in the country in 2014 when the story begins. When Derrick read this letter, he was alone. He immediately called the police. And the officer who responded to the scene asked on reading the letter, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
Valid question.
I like where your head's at, cop. That's exactly what I thought upon reading it. What the fuck is this?
That night, Derrick and Maria emailed the couple that had sold them the home. They're called the Woods. Mainly because of a line in the letter Derrick received. The line is, "I asked the Woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened." So in this email, Derrick and Maria asked if the Woods knew who the Watcher was, or if they had ever received any strange letters at 657 Boulevard. Their response was that in 23 years living at the house, they had never received any strange letters. Until a few days before they moved out of the house. They received a letter from the Watcher, thanking them for taking such good care of the house over the years. They thought the letter was strange, but because nothing else weird had happened, and frankly probably because they were out of there,
That's right.
they threw it away and didn't think much of it. The next day, the Woods accompanied the Broaduses to the police station, correct?
Yeah.
Where a detective told Derrick and Maria not to tell any of their new neighbors about the letters, because those new neighbors were now suspects in this case.
Oh, man. Moving is hard, you guys. Moving is really challenging. Even it's not the moving of the stuff. It's I'm going to have to live among a new set of people. Are they crazy? Are they the kind of people who will send me a letter claiming to be a watcher of my house? Okay.
Over the course of the next few weeks, the Broadus family continued their renovations of the house, but they weren't living there yet. And of course, when they were at the house, they were extremely vigilant.
Sure.
Even paranoid would be understandable. Maria was anxious, yelling her children's names the second they wandered away in the yard or in the house. And when Derrick gave a tour of the house to a neighboring couple, he nearly lost it when the woman of the couple said, "It'll be nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood."
Yeah.
Maria and Derrick didn't tell their young children what was going on because they didn't want to frighten them. A couple weeks after the first letter arrived, Maria opened the mailbox to find a second. I'm going to skip around in this letter a little bit. "The workers have been busy, and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will. I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream."
Oh my God. Yeah, this is the point at which you don't move into the house, you continue renovating it, and then you sell it.
In the letter, he talks about whose bedrooms are where, who will be sleeping where, and as soon as he knows, it'll help him plan better. "All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too, Broadus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I will be watching."
Oh my God.
It's clear from this letter that this person was closely observing the family and their movements in the home. The Watcher mentioned the Broadus children by name, birth order, and even nickname. The writer of the letter brought up one child in particular who they mentioned seeing painting at an easel in the home's enclosed porch. Derrick and Maria were like, yeah, these kids aren't coming back to this house. Now, they still hadn't moved in at this point, so they postponed their move indefinitely and just stopped bringing the kids there. Can you even imagine?
No, I cannot.
And during this time, another letter arrived asking where they had gone and saying 657 Boulevard missed them. The letters had been processed at a post office in a nearby town.
Oh, so they're actually being mailed. They're not just being dropped off at the mailbox. Okay.
I guess so. The details about the construction workers and children indicated that the person was probably a local. This immediately threw suspicion on the surrounding neighbors of the Broaduses. The easel mentioned in the second letter was hidden from the street by the house's vegetation. Only someone close, like next door or behind the house, could even see that area. Derrick pretty quickly zoned in on a family next door to them who had a son diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was given to some strange, but the family maintained harmless behavior. The family lived next door to the Broaduses, and their house was in range to see what was going on there. And the timeline matched because the family had lived in that house since about the 1960s, when the Watcher claimed their father had begun watching the house. Now, the police investigated this person, but there wasn't any hard evidence, so they couldn't charge him with anything. And Derrick and Maria suspected him for quite a long period of time. There was a time where the police said, after they spoke to him, his narrative sort of matched up a little bit with what was said in the letters. But ultimately, the police didn't find that there was any evidence that he was involved. This was obviously frustrating for Derrick and Maria, who were like, yeah, well, our kids are being threatened and you can't do anything. I'm sure so much anger and fear. Derrick started investigating on his own, and he became obsessed. He set up cameras outside the home. He hid in the dark to see if anyone was watching the house. He had diagrams of when each neighbor had moved in, overlays of the street showing the overlap between homes that could see the easel and the quote-unquote approximate range of earshot of neighbors who might have heard Maria yelling the children's names. They hired a PI who ran background reports on the neighbors they suspected and staked the neighborhood out. They consulted with former FBI agents on the case and even hired Robert Linehan to run a threat assessment. He's a former FBI agent. Because of the language, spacing in the letters, and the literary panache, as Linehan said it, he thought the writer was an older male. He didn't think the writer would actually act on the threats they made, but there was enough erratic nuance in the letters to cast some doubt on that.
Yeah.
The Watcher was also angry. They seemed to be upset about money moving into the town and the renovations the Broaduses were making. They ask in one of the letters, "Are you one of those Hoboken transplants who are ruining Westfield? The house is crying from all the pain it is going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old, and so did my father. But he kept watching until the day he died, and now I watch and wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again."
Yeah.
The Broaduses, in cooperation with the police, sent a letter to those next-door neighbors that they suspected and announced that they'd be tearing the house down. Now, this was just a ruse to see if they would get any kind of reaction, but they didn't. The police discovered a couple of sex offenders in the neighborhood, but there wasn't any concrete way to track the letters. There wasn't any hard evidence. Derrick and Maria started having nightmares, and in late 2014, with no leads to go on, the investigation stalled out. The renovations, including a security system, were finished. The neighbors wondered why the Broaduses weren't moving into the house. Remember, they weren't telling anyone what was going on. And the rumors started flying. Maria began going to therapy, as you do. The Broaduses decided to sell 657 Boulevard. They began by asking more than they paid for the house to recoup the renovation costs. But they couldn't find a buyer because the rumor mill was on fire. They lowered the price and offered to disclose information about the letters to serious buyers. And eventually the story leaked despite their best efforts, and soon it was national news. The family was flooded with media requests, and news vans were parked outside 657 Boulevard 24/7. Derrick and Maria felt that they had to explain what was happening to their children. Their kids had a lot of questions, they were frightened, but Derrick and Maria couldn't really answer those questions. The police ran a DNA test on the envelopes and discovered female DNA. They ruled out those direct neighbors, as I mentioned, the Broaduses had suspected for so long, though the police didn't explain how they ruled them out. The Broaduses conducted handwriting analysis, trying to lock down the suspect, to no avail. Derrick even almost had a friend hack into the neighbors' computers via Wi-Fi to look for evidence, until he realized, oh, that's illegal. The police discovered that another family nearby had also received a letter from the Watcher around the time that Derrick and Maria found their first letter. These particular family's children were all grown up, and they ended up throwing their letter out like the Woods did at the time, thinking nothing of it, until the Broaduses' experiences came to light. So rumors started spreading that the Broaduses themselves had written the letter to get out from under a mortgage that they couldn't afford. And I just don't believe that for a second. That just seems horrifying to me.
Yeah, no.
The Broaduses put the house back on the market in 2016. As soon as they would get a serious buyer, they would disclose information about the letters, and inevitably the buyer would back out. Their real estate lawyer suggested that their one option might be to tear the house down and build 2 smaller houses on the lot. But this would require the planning board approval, because turning one lot into 2 would mean those 2 lots within the bigger lot would fall just short of the required width of 70 feet. And when I say short, I mean short by a little more than 3 feet. The fucking town went crazy. People were throwing shade on Facebook or defending the family. In January of 2017, the planning board met, and Teresa, it was nuts. After covering the riveting topic of whether a Wells Fargo would be allowed brighter light bulbs than the neighborhood regulation allowed for, they came around to the 657 Boulevard proposal. One neighbor actually hired a lawyer to challenge the proposal. Neighbors were worried trees would have to be knocked down, that the houses would have unappealing front-facing garages. I don't want to look out at a driveway. This spells the end of the neighborhood. Our neighborhood is under attack and we have to take a stand. 4 hours later, there hadn't been much mention of why all this was happening in the first place. No one wanted to talk about the fact that there was quite likely a psychologically unhinged, potentially dangerous person in their neighborhood. And at 11:30 that night, the board rejected the Broadus' proposal to divide the lot. It was unanimous. This pisses me off.
Yeah.
Derrick and Maria ended up renting the house out to a couple with grown children and big dogs. 2 weeks after the tenants moved in, another letter arrived. You wonder who the watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong, with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher. This letter also threatened them. Maybe a car accident. Maybe a fire. Maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones break.
Oh my God.
On Christmas Eve of 2017, several residents of the Boulevard area also received anonymous letters. These letters were sent to the most vocally aggressive toward Derrick and Maria. The letters held a similar tone to the Watcher's letters, calling people out for their inaccurate attacks. These letters were signed Friends of the Broadus Family. Reeves Wideman is the man who wrote the article that I'm referencing here, and Derrick later admitted to Reeves that he had actually written those letters. He was fed up, he said, and honestly, I can't blame him. The state of dread he and his wife must have been in, and then to feel attacked by the people around you on top of that is just completely unimaginable. The Broadus family finally sold 657 Boulevard in June of 2019. They took about a $341,000 loss on the property.
Yeah.
No one's been able to successfully contact the new owners of the home, so it's not publicly known if they've received any letters from the Watcher or not. The Watcher has never been identified or apprehended.
The idea of that town planning meeting. Like, on the one hand, yes, let's maintain the character of the neighborhood. We like it because it looks and feels a certain way. Okay, great. On the other hand, these people are being threatened. Their children are being observed and threatened. And we're not going to talk about that as a reason why these people want to leave the neighborhood. We're not going to, acknowledge that this is coming from a place of legitimate fear.
It's a creepy one, man.
That is crazy. Someone in that neighborhood has issues.
It had to be. Whew, we made it.
Whew.
Take my hand now, everybody.
I was clutching it in fear already.
Yeah. Let's walk back into the sunshine now with this last story. Hannah and Elliot met in their last year at the University of Toronto. Hannah studied interior design and Elliot studied architecture. They fell in love and 2 years later moved in together. Eventually, the couple temporarily moved into an over 100-year-old farmhouse on Hannah's family farm in Nova Scotia. The house was built in the late 1800s. Hannah's father grew up in the house, but it had eventually become a rental property, and then it sat vacant for years. As I said, this was supposed to be a temporary living situation, but Hannah and Elliot saw potential there, and they started restoring the old farmhouse. Gradually, they fell in love with the place. This happens, right? You put your energy and love into something concrete, and it loves you back.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just in love. You create a relationship with place. Hannah and Elliot have been documenting their restoration of the farmhouse on their YouTube channel, Wabi-Sabi, and it's delightful. The name of their channel is a play off the Japanese concept of Wabi-Sabi. Teresa, you're familiar with Wabi-Sabi.
I am.
So let's just acknowledge here that we're two white women talking about a concept that is from Japan, that is not part of our cultural background.
Yeah.
I love this concept, though. I have, in my past, researched it quite a bit, so I would like to admittedly provide an oversimplified explanation of what Wabi-Sabi is. Wabi-Sabi is the aesthetic belief that the signs of age, like cracks, like wrinkles, like chipping paint, should all be embraced and preserved as part of the truth of the object. So if you have an old chipped tea set from your family that holds a lot of history, but of course in that history it's become chipped, it's become damaged, that you should honor those damages as it's part of the essence of the object. Wabi-Sabi is a little bit of a broader concept than that, because there are some aspects of it that have to do with space and the way you use space and keep negative space and positive space in balance. But what Wabi-Sabi is generally known for is this embracing of something being weathered, right? The beauty in the weathered.
Yeah, and acknowledging transience and that everything is changing and shifting. For humans, because we are linear creatures, that means aging, right? And for our objects as well. A great example of the way to approach that is that if you have a tea set that is passed down in your family and is chipped and broken, a Wabi-Sabi way of repairing that tea set would be to make those repairs visible. So you see that it's been broken and you fix it so that it can be used, but you fill the cracks with gold, for example. It's a classic example.
So this is what their channel name is referencing. Hannah and Elliot's videos are playful pieces of art. You've seen them, right, Teresa?
All of them, yeah.
There's a lot of sped up footage because we all love a montage. There will be almost a stop motion animation sequence of a saw or sander moving across a board or the floor. The music is old swing or cool remixes of older songs. During the videos, Hannah is coy and ethereal, dancing around and popping out from around a corner or inside a bathtub, and Elliot is just a big old goofball. They are now in their, I believe, early 30s, but they've been doing this for years. They've infused so much of their relationship into the house and into the videos that you can't help but feel that you know them. Obviously, the projects and these videos take a really long time to produce. They release about a video every month. And the house is coming along beautifully. They don't always know what they're doing, and they don't always do a perfect job, but they're learning and they're putting their energy and love and intention into this home. I remember one video in which Elliot is putting in a new bathroom, and the house had only had one bathroom, so Hannah was very excited about the second bathroom, which was also functioning as a laundry room. And I don't know how much you know about toilet installation, Teresa. Probably a bit, I would imagine.
You think your average stormtrooper knows how to install a toilet main? Anytime I can reference Clerks, I do. I don't know a lot, except I know it has to flow down.
Well, when you install a toilet, you have to plug the drainage hole while you're messing around, right? Because you don't want that sewage smell to come up. So in this video where Elliot does this bathroom, he installs the toilet and forgets to take the rag out of the out pipe of the toilet, and then has to take the toilet back out, get a new ring because the ring is a one-use thing, and then reinstall the toilet. It was very funny, and I'm sure it was frustrating, but he handled it well. Not always perfect.
To connect that bathroom to their main out, he basically had to run a pipe the entire way under the house. So he's in the root cellar of this 100-year-old farmhouse, trying to figure out how to get a pipe to a certain height at the other side of the house, which is this is why we call plumbers.
Exactly. Their latest project on their channel is to take a 70-year-old shed on the property and convert it into a workshop for Elliot. So Elliot and Hannah recently had a baby, and it seems like when Elliot's working, it's bothering the baby. And Hannah and baby are sometimes making it hard for Elliot to focus. So they're just two on top of each other, and Elliot needs his own separate workspace. In this latest video, Elliot is cleaning out this 70-year-old shed to prepare for renovations into a workshop. The shed's totally filled with junk. This is gross. This is going to be triggering for animal lovers, but during his cleaning of the shed, he actually finds an old skeleton of a cat. This wasn't anyone's cat that they knew. It wasn't a pet, but Elliot shows the skeleton to Hannah, who starts crying. And Elliot takes time away from the project to make a grave marker for the cat. He names the cat Mr. Whiskers, buries it, and has a small ceremony for the burial. That's the kind of people they are. As Elliot clears out the shed, he really sees the condition it's in. The floorboards are completely rotted, as well as some of the beams in the ceiling and the walls. Part of the roof is just completely rotting away. Hannah's family members aren't usually in the videos, but in this one, her father comes by a couple of times. He tells Elliot that he should knock down the shed and build something new. He clearly doesn't understand why Elliot's engaging with this project, and he tells Elliot he's in over his head.
Mm-hmm.
Elliot, in this video, says, this is a quote, "It's bad. Worse than I thought. And the more I look, the more I see what's wrong and just how difficult it's going to be to fix. Knock her down and start over. I've heard that a lot. It's pretty obvious that restoring it will be the significantly harder and time-consuming option, but the goals are different. One is to build efficiently, and the other is to preserve the history that we have left. And I want to do that." At this point in the video, Hannah's grandfather comes by the shed and shares some of the history of the building. Elliot says that he knows the sheds would go into the landfill if it weren't for their project. He's choosing to participate in this story, this richer and more challenging story that requires him as an active participant. That story, he says, is way more interesting. It's the story he's choosing to pursue. So these stories today are obviously about our relationship to place. And what these stories bring up for me personally is how complicated our relationship to place is. Mm-hmm. We can take something scary like a haunting, for example, which is just history coming back to us, and we can embrace it. We can think everything is rosy, and our relationship to place can shift on a dime as new information is revealed, rock us suddenly into something dark and threatening like it did for the Broadus family. But I'm most inspired by Elliot and Hannah's relationship to place. History is our relationship to this place, to our actions on this planet. Hannah and Elliot are embracing the history, and to be sure, it's an easy history. But we can do the same with the darker parts of our history, with the story of where we live. We should focus not on covering things up, on changing history, but on bringing things to light. We can take somewhat of a Wabi-Sabi approach to our story, allowing the cracks to show and inform where we go next. We can choose to actively participate in our relationship to place. And that's my own personal resolution after studying and writing about these stories. This is part of what we're trying to do with the podcast here. We tell a lot of stories. A lot of those stories are from history. What you and I have discussed a lot is that part of our job is to bring things to light in our history. And that is not easy for us white people. Mm-hmm. I don't want to tie this up in too neat of a bow or be reductive in any way. But just like in Wabi-Sabi, we are to embrace the truth. There's the truth of the object, but we need to embrace the truth of our history on a grander scale. And let that inform where we're going.
If we don't actually look at our history, if we don't look at what's real, we won't actually see that it's broken. And if we don't see and acknowledge that it's broken, we can't fix it.
And we can't move forward. Certainly not positively anyway. My sources for this episode today: an article on thecut.com by Reeves Wiedemann, piece on the Hunt a Killer website by Maddie Rowley, Wikipedia, of course. Atlas Obscura has a piece about the Ackley House in Nyack, New York. The YouTube channel Wabi-Sabi, that's W-A-B-I, new word S-A-B-E, and the Wabi-Sabi website, which is WABISAB-E.com. That's it.
You're the best, Claire. Thank you. That was lovely.
Hey everybody, note here at the end, we do not have a smidgen this coming weekend, but we will be back next Wednesday with our long episode, as normal. Carry on. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Testing? Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.